making sure, and I believe my
for having worked together to organize this dialogue. Crystal, of discussion, but the total amount of time is 90 minutes. Today's session it is my honor and pleasure to invite Mr. William Lugemwa.
Can you hear me?
Hear you, and feel free to turn on your video as you make your speech.
Today's regional dialogue on African farming systems. I'll give a brief overview, then go into challenges and opportunities. Food systems describe the totality of multiple actors and interactions within and along the food value chain, from input supply and production to transportation, processing, retailing, wholesaling, preparation, consumption, and disposal. Africa, a continent projected as the world's future for food production, is under rapid change, shaped by a number of economic, political, megatrends, among which includes farmers, and people could benefit immensely from this sector through the potential of inclusive growth that it could drive. However, a radical transformation shift is required for the continent to move from the current state of significant importation farmers to all arable land is in a strategic agreement that was inaugurated recently, offers the continent a promise of unity countries, accounting for nearly 47% of the trade volumes and margins in Africa. Africa's post-harvest handling, distribution, processing, and packaging has been made but lost between 2014 and 20. Even markets. The continent has 15 farming systems, and nearly 70% of African smallholder farmers subsist on 5 farming systems. This farming system provides for more than 100 million people, of whom 58 million live on less than $1.25 a day. This accounts for 23% of the total rural poor in sub-Saharan Africa region. The diverse and complex farming systems in Africa are a result of complex evolution, but compounded by the challenge of developing the agriculture sector and food systems in the African continent. Firstly, the vast majority of the hungry and food insecure in Africa reside in rural areas. And secondly, effective food systems require productive and resilient farming systems. Agricultural productivity in Africa is still Africa.
I believe all participants have received a copy of that paper that was put together by multiple experts across the continent to provide the basis for today's discussions. As I said at the beginning, once we are done with this opening session, we are now going to move into the second session, which is the breakout session. And I already introduced the speakers, I mean the chairs of those two sessions. I believe all of you have received, but I have screened them for your convenience. So over to the different chairs, take us through the different the 2 breakout sessions. And we'll be back here in an hour and a half. Please share. rapporteurs.
Both the intervention. The other recommendation, it's and it came out very process and legislative food systems in Africa without
can be able to swap
industry requirement, which this And on that note, I yield back.
Here.
group was the need to allow for
is yours. If we can.
The Full System Summit. I will proceed to make 4 quick points. Like we heard from
Those powerful remarks on behalf of
countries successful implementation do happen and can happen. How do we explain the situation where bad policies are excellently executed, while good policies are badly executed? The immediate challenge
and it will be different in two respects. It will be an action summit and it will be a people summit. And she is pushing and challenging us as her team, but also all of our stakeholders quite hard to do so. So let me say two things about one, the action, and the second one about the people summit aspect. For the action summit, we know where we need to head. We have the SDG 2 pushing for zero hunger until the end of this decade. We have, for example, the Paris Agreement that tells us that the world must not get hotter than 1.5 degrees centigrade. We know in SDG 15, for example, that we cannot afford to lose any more land and soil that can be used for agriculture. Today, we have a size of degraded land which is equivalent to the whole continent of Latin America. So clearly, our food systems are broken. And in order to repair them, we need the political will of heads of state. But at the same time, we need the mobilization of everybody from the bottom up. And this is the people summit aspect. And for us, it means a very decentralized structure of this summit. We are inviting every single government of this planet to host food system summit dialogues that bring together the different stakeholders in an unprecedented way. We need, of course, the ministers of agriculture. We need youth. We need the ministers of health. We need the ministers of education, of environment, and so on. Most importantly, we need the people who are working the land on the ground. We need the many women who are smallholder farmers. We need the rural populations. We need the young people. And we want to empower them by giving everyone a seat on this national level dialogues. We are also encouraging everybody to become an organizer of independent food system summit dialogues so that communities can organize around their needs for food systems transformation. And we are committed, and we have a powerful champion in Agnes Kalibata to bring the voices from the grounds and also, and of course, from all countries back to the top of international decision making to really mobilize from the bottom up and from the top down at the same time for transformation. And conversations such as that, as this one, are most important for us. And I'm happy to take the findings of these conversations into our summit preparatory. And I would invite you to check for the many possibilities also to engage electronically on our website, foodsystems.community, and also on Twitter and social media. And if I have a chance, I will put that in the chat box so we can continue this conversation. And with that and my many thanks, I would hand back to the moderator. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for those remarks and for the invitation for all of us to really engage deeply and closely with the summit. Next up, we have Dr. Bebe Haile Gabriel, who is the Assistant Director General and Regional Representative for Africa at the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Dr. Bebe, the floor is yours. Dr. Bebe? We can see you, but unfortunately we're having a hard time hearing you.
IT, would you please unmute Dr. Abibi?
Apologies, the connection is from the other side.
Welcome, sir. We can hear you now. Oh dear, oh dear. We're back to audio problems.
IT, would you please help unmuting Dr. Abibi? IT, do we have an issue with the connection of Dr. Abibi? Dr. Abibi, can you hear us?
We can see Dr. Bebe is connecting with some earphones. I'm optimistic that that will resolve the challenge that we're experiencing. Something is happening.
Let's try now. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir. We've got you live and clear.
Okay, okay.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. It's a pleasure to join this high-level roundtable on a very important topic, leveraging regional action for sustainable food systems in Africa. I think the appropriate starting point would be to look at the backdrop, the background of the African food systems, which is defined by vulnerability to multiple and overlapping shocks. You would note that even before COVID-19 pandemic, there were about 235 million hungry people in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019. including 66 million people in acute food insecurity. In addition, healthy diets have become out of reach for nearly 1 billion people in Africa because simply they are not affordable. So what COVID-19 has done was it has further compounded this problem. So we have the issue of dealing with these multiple and overlapping shocks and threats. And in fact, this would present Africa's context somewhat unique compared to other regions. And we can even talk of a second factor that would perhaps make the Africa's case somewhat unique in the absence of effective and adequate support systems, stimulus packages in particular, against these multiple and overlapping shocks. You would have noted that African governments, with very few exceptions, could not provide for stimulus packages similar to what developed countries have done. And this is mainly because of fiscal constraints. On the other hand, the drivers of this vulnerability have significant regional dimensions. We can talk of the climate extremes, the transboundary pests and diseases. Let's remember the desert locust that has been ravaging crops in and pasture in Eastern Africa region, the conflicts, the economic downturns and slowdowns, and so on. Secondly, the agri-food systems in Africa feature a lot of inefficiencies caused by structural deficits. There is a lot of resource use inefficiency. Leakages are significant. There is this huge dependence on food imports and food aid. There is this disjoint intersectoral linkages, market and institutional failures. For example, low farm gate prices run parallel to expensive urban food in the same locality. The source of agricultural growth in Africa has largely been through expansion of the cultivated area at the expense of forests, grasslands, and other uses, rather than from increased productivity. A recent FAO study shows that land use change between 2000 and 2018, in 18-year span, that about 12 million hectares of forest were cleared and converted to cropland. And this constitutes about 58% of the cleared forest areas. Post-harvest losses in Africa are estimated to be about 14%, and this is one of the largest against a backdrop of low production level overall. Water use efficiency has been the lowest, showing only marginal improvements over time. And this with comparatively lower water stress levels, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. So a failure of rain in just one season could have devastating impacts and could wipe out whatever has been achieved. Irrigated agriculture is still in a single-digit percentage point. Now, there are emerging regional and global opportunities. On the demand side, the fact that each year Africa imports tens of billions of dollars worth of food is a good indicator of the size of Africa's food markets. And with the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement entering into force, the African food markets are expected to grow. On the supply side, the potentials for increased productivity and opportunities for agri-food transformation are huge. For example, according to some estimates, Africa could be 2 to 3 times more productive. The Africa Development Bank estimates that the value of annual agricultural output would increase from 280 billion US dollars to as much as 1 trillion US dollars by the year 2030. Innovation and new digital technologies are driving the agri-food transformation process at a faster pace that has never been experienced before. And these shifts have how agricultural value chains are organized, providing new opportunities for more and better jobs, entrepreneurship, and innovation to address binding constraints in food systems. Now, there is no shortcut to modernizing the agri-food systems in an inclusive and resilient manner. There is this notion that agriculture growth has been happening in Africa, the problem being that it was not inclusive enough, hence with little positive impact on poverty reduction and job creation. Yes, there have been some growth, but it was not satisfactory compared to the huge potential which is achievable because the starting point is low. Now, as regards to the inclusiveness, what is really missing is access to means, as well as access to power that determine the patterns of distribution of those means. I'm talking about access to information, access to technology, to financial services, to jobs and income opportunities, to education, infrastructure, to land, as well as factor and product markets, and so on. So as regards inclusiveness, perhaps we can even talk about the exclusionary policies and practices that have systematically neglected agriculture and the rural sector as a priority sector. The available figures on allocation of public investment in agriculture could be good indicators in this regard. As percent of GDP, public expenditure in agriculture fell from 0.64%, which is less than 1%, 0.64% in 2001 to 0.15% in 2018 Africa-wide. And definitely this is low and it has been declining. So we ask the question, is agriculture the priority sector, really? I had a recent conversation with the Minister of Trade and Agriculture, Minister of Trade and Industry. I didn't say agriculture, it's a Minister of Trade and Industry, and asked him, how could they support an agri-food systems transformation? He outlined what he saw to be a sound strategy for a sustainable agri-food systems transformation process that he can support. 4 points he outlined. 1, a market-driven approach to organize agriculture production. 2nd, an industry-led process for strong agriculture industry linkages across value chain development. 3rd, a strong reliance on science, innovation, and technology to improve performance or productivity. And 4, a system that brings value to the farmers and rural producers, and I might also add consumers, making them at the center of the transformation agenda along the whole value chain. I can't agree with the ministers more, but let me summarize by mentioning what I would think to be important areas for actions at national levels. However, there is a lot that regional actions could be leveraged towards a successful and sustainable transformation. So solutions and capacities to bear on issues of productivity, equity, and sustainability. Number 1, we need to address issues related to access to resources and opportunities to socially disadvantaged groups and sectors, including women, youth, the rural sector, and so on. 2nd, we need to address the infrastructure deficit in its both soft and hard aspects, the digital agriculture, but also roads, storage facilities, processing, transportation, logistics, skills, and so on. 3rd, we need to address the issue of incentives to invest and to act by all stakeholders, thus bringing value to the farmers, to rural producers, to consumers, to investors, and so on, such as factoring in consumers as significant stakeholders for healthy and nutritious diets, for example. And finally, effective engagement of partnerships and stakeholders, including platforms for knowledge, data, and experience sharing. FAO has been actively engaging national and regional partners to facilitate this through flagship initiatives such as the Hand in Hand initiative, the digital villages, to support rural transformation, among others. There is a lot to learn from the excellent collaboration with the African Union, the regional economic communities, and other partners in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for those powerful comments, powerful contributions, really laying out the path forward and the priorities that we ought to be focusing on. At this point, I believe we have enough time to take maybe one or two questions from our participants. Might we have any questions from the participants to any of the presenters that we have had? And then maybe IT can help us with the audio challenges.
For that,
any of our participants who might have questions, please go ahead and go into the Q&A section of the Zoom. Right at the very bottom, you'll see Q&A, and I am on there looking to see if any questions. Now, to our panelists, I see a question about pesticides. Use of pesticides during the pest pandemic, like the recent locust swarms. And some of you have talked about the locust swarms. I wonder if any of you would want to just make any comments about regulations in place and enforcement of regulations to both manage the swarms, even as we don't poison ourselves with too many pesticides. Do any of our panelists want to make a comment in response to that question? And any of the panelists who would want to make a comment, please go ahead and just unmute yourself and proceed.
Thank you, moderator. Maybe I'm taking a first take here. I need to explain, I'm not an expert on pesticides in a sense, but it seems to me that this is a classic example for trade-offs where you have on one side a situation you need to address, on the other side also potential damage. And the way for me to solve these issues is really to bring all the community together and get the different aspects of the problem so you can find a solution together. And I would say, you know, this is a good example why we need cross-sectoral communities coming in. And in this case, it would not only be the agricultural experts, but also experts on public health, doctors, people who live in the region to really get a full picture. And as you say, avoid that a situation in which we react to one problem doesn't result in a bigger problem on the other side. But I'm sure that on the panel, we have also lots of expertise and others might want to come in. Thank you. You're still muted, moderator.
Thank you so much, Martin. I really appreciate your comment there and your feedback there. I see a question about the process of organizing national dialogues. One of the person who had asked a question directed this question. Agnes Girabo has directed this question to the speaker from NEPAD, but Martin?
Yes, thank you. I see the question, yes.
Yes, I was wondering if Martin Frick could talk about, as a deputy to the to Kalibata, President Kalibata on this, if you might speak about the dialogues and national dialogues.
Yes, indeed. There was in November an invitation by the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Amina Mohammed, to all of the ambassadors in New York from every country of the UN membership. The invitation is to host national level dialogues and to start working with us by nominating one person
en nommant une personne
that would serve as the national convener. We have now way more than 70 countries in the pipeline who have planned to do national level dialogues. We have 50 so far which have nominated their national conveners, out of which many are African countries. So there is a website, summitdialogues.org, summitdialogues.org, which lists all the countries that have nominated so far national conveners and gives their contact details. So you can write to them. If you don't see your country listed, feel free to talk to your government whether there is an interest in hosting a national level dialogue. And again, on a different logic, everybody can become a convener for dialogues on a smaller level. I see, for example, my friend Divine in the chat box bringing in many national level, many independent organized dialogues, and many others can follow the example and do in your region, in your province, in your village, in your city, do similar dialogues. So it is two different logics. One is working with the governments and an invitation to the governments. And the other logic is to empower individuals to work in their communities, which also can be regional, which also could be, for example, a group of countries in the Sahel, because the situation is quite similar. But that is just as an idea or an inspiration. And back to you, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I also am going to address this question to Martin Bwalia. The AUDA is also very much engaged in national dialogues. Perhaps you might be able to speak to us about how that, your engagement at that level. And I'm also wanting to tie that to a question from Belay Yazio on the political commitment of governments.
Yeah. Should I go?
Yes, please, Mr. Bwalia.
Thank you. Primarily, this is the point that Martin Fricks has explained in terms of where it starts. There should be, and we had this question from Uganda already, they should start with checking where this letter from the UN Deputy Secretary General has landed in the countries. The letter came from the UN resident, through the UN resident representatives in the countries. So where the letter landed in terms of whether sometimes we believe it's in the ministries of foreign affairs, but it can also go to other ministries, and that should be the starting point. Once the convener is nominated, that is when we come into action also as the AUDA in terms of supporting and working with the conveners on a number of things, including ensuring that there are mechanisms to bring in what you would call the marginalized and the grassroots communities who normally would never participate in dialogues of this kind, as actually Martin Fricks was talking about when you referred to People's Summit. We're talking about food vendors, we're talking about communities in rural systems and all that. So it's about how do we access them, the tools and mechanisms, and the discussion guidelines that allows them to actually engage into this dialogue. Then we also are supporting them to make sure that everything in terms of the dialogue is happening within existing institutional arrangements. This is important to ensure that there is life beyond the summit. Because if it's done superficially, then there will be no ownership, no responsibility about, especially beyond the summit. So we are connecting to national development plans, food security plans, welfare, and all those strategic elements all the way to the budget in the countries. And it's about underlining implementation beyond the summit. and of course, connecting then to expertise in terms of science, analysis, and the facts that can inform those dialogues. So those are a few things that we are actually doing in supporting and strengthening the ability of the conveners to manage the process at national level. And of course, continue to underline that it has to be a national led, national owned process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that input. It needs to be a nationally led process. I have the engagement and questions are flying, hands are flying in the air. There's so many questions coming up. I want to now to IT, there is Dr. Jemima Njoke who has her hand up from amongst the attendees, and I would love to call on her to tell us more about more about inclusion in general and questions of gender in particular, and the role of women in food systems. And I know Dr. Njoke is the champion for the gender cross-cutting theme for the Food Systems Summit. Is it possible to allow her to speak? To our friends at ICT, if you're able to, fantastic. Dr. Njoke, I believe the floor is yours.
Hello, I think I have been allowed to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Dr. Wanjiru Kamau-Rutenberg. Good to see you again, Martin. I wanted to make two very quick comments because in these conversations, we have talked a lot about the role of women in food systems, not just in Africa, but globally. And what we are really seeking to see is some explicit commitments about supporting gender equality and women's empowerment. And there's a couple of cross-cutting solutions or ideas that are coming up, including guaranteeing women's land rights at a scale that is significant so that they can be able to have control over their production. Supporting an alliance of financial institutions, governments, development banks that are actually committed to closing the gender gap in financial inclusion. So I'm actually looking forward to working with you all to start making some of these commitments explicit, and so that we can go beyond acknowledging the fact that women are playing important roles in the food systems to actually having concrete actions going forward before and after the summit. I think the second point I want to make quickly is in the national dialogues, and I think as IFPRI, I'm director for Africa at the International Food Policy Research Institute as well, and really looking forward to working with ADA, NEPAD, and AGRA and others to support governments to actually do an analysis of their food systems, so that even as they go into dialogue, that they are dialoguing around evidence and making some concrete priority interventions and recommendations and commitments that are based on evidence. So we do have a team at IFPRI that's really looking forward to working with governments and the continental organizations on this. Thanks, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Njoke, for that contribution. I see a couple of themes of questions emerging. I see we have questions emerging around youth engagement and Indigenous people, engaging youth, Indigenous people, and even people with disabilities. And I wonder if any of our speakers, any of our panelists would be able to just go off mute and tell us, how are you thinking about both in terms of the summit, how do we engage? I'm seeing a suggestion about using local media to take messages to the grassroots. How do we engage on? And I see Mr. Divine has something to say. Let me have Mr. Divine and then Martin Frick. And any of the other panelists who would like to speak to these questions, please raise your hand and I'll be able to see it.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator, for this opportunity. Yeah, I wanna be very, very short. Yeah, actually, right now we're translating the summit documents. We're translating the summit documents into local languages. We've been able to do that with the SDGs many years ago, and we thought that it was very, very important for us to engage the person living with disabilities. In Cameroon, we are working with the president of the person living with disabilities in the whole nation. They have actually committed themselves to transcribe and to train, first of all the CSAYM members to be able to leverage their actions through Braille. That's one aspect we are working on. The second thing we're equally doing is we're using the local languages to disseminate the information about the Food System Summit dialogues. And so far, as I said early on in our session, we're leading this process globally. So far, we've organized close to 30 independent dialogues between January 5th and February 27th. So we feel that everyone on this group, on this call, very interested to better understand on how to scale up these dialogue processes. We are very much available. Right now, I'm in the UAE, and I'm looking forward to organizing one perhaps in the few days here at the level of the Consulate of Cameroon, yes, in Dubai. So I've discussed with the ambassador, and he's willing to give us the space at the embassy to get this done. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Divine, for that intervention. Now, to all our panelists, we've had questions coming up about cities and the role of cities in food systems. I wonder if any of you might want to speak to those questions. We also have a question, really important, about the cost of farm inputs. Both of these are, of course, questions. And then finally, also a question about the youth bulge and how we can leverage Africa's youth bulge in our cities. Now, I'm so sorry, Martin, I skipped over you. I'll come back to you now, and maybe you can even speak into these.
Indeed, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you for Divine. It's fantastic to have it translated into local languages. That is exactly what we needed. I'm just looking at the interpreter, and it seems there is a problem that the internet connection froze. Okay, I see another interpreter coming online, because I just wanted to say that this meeting is being translated into sign language. It's just something I cannot commend you enough. I think it's fantastic. I was myself a lead negotiator for the UN Convention of the Right of People with Disabilities, and to see how this is being made accessible for people with a hearing disability is fantastic, and I can only commend you for what you are doing. On the youth question, I wanted to say that I shared in the chat box the Summit Dialogues website, and there is a brand new space for young people, which is just online for 2 days now, where we can have this engagement with young people all over the planet. And we have very, very active young champions and young people engaging. Divine has put in the chat box also the possibility to register as a food system hero and to work with your local community. And that would really, really help everybody. Now, moderator, you ask a question about the cities. And part of our engagement is that we work with ICLEI, that's a global community of cities and local communities. And they have, I believe by today, 60 summit dialogues coming up in cities. We are also reaching out to other city networks. FAO is hosting a city network for food security. And we believe that cities and local communities are really essential to bringing food security and in particular resilience to our food systems. And we see with the COVID pandemic how very important that is. And I would leave the other questions to the other panelists. I unfortunately will need to leave very soon, but thank you so much for the opportunity. And also thank you for the interpreters for their fantastic work.
Thank you so much, Martin. You've brought so much light and knowledge into this dialogue today. We really appreciate your contribution. Before I want to give an opportunity to the other panelists to speak into any of the issues around cities, around the cost of farm inputs, around the youth bulge, and I'm also seeing a question about engaging of the diaspora. If any of the other panelists would be willing to speak into that, perhaps I could ask the FAO's Dr. Abebe to speak into it. I also see that we have one of our panelists who Lucy Mushoki has joined us, and I wonder if ICT or IT could please enable Lucy Mushoki, who has her hand up in the attendees section, to unmute. Now, Lucy Mushoki is a CEO of Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium. Lucy, as we are really at the very end of our day together, our time together, I'm not going to be able to give you the full amount of time that we had allocated, but I think it is important to hear from you, and especially from that private sector perspective. So please share some words of wisdom with us.
Thank you, moderator, Dr. Wanjiru, and apologies. I think there was a problem in connecting, but eventually I'm there. And so sad that I'm not able to have enough time to share my perspective. And especially because we really believe that we have a real key role as private sector to play. And specifically, I'm particularly interested in the SME agenda. I have discussed this quite in a very elaborate way, very deliberate, because I believe that our African private sector is the SMEs, and 64% of our food is distributed by the SMEs, who continue facing a lot of challenges, but of course there's a lot of opportunities. So the challenges that we are talking about is in terms of capacity. Obviously, capacity is a key in all sectors. But when it comes to our private sector, the SMEs, specifically when you're addressing the trade, how are we going to support our SMEs in terms of the logistics for trade? How are we going to ensure that they have access to the technical barriers that we continue facing across the region? How are we going to support these and ensure that the SMEs are able to access the different markets across the region, and especially now with the AfCFTA? So indeed, this is very important to us. How are we going to minimize the import and export burden and technical support, technical uptake, research partnership, PPPs? These are quite a number of issues that I would have discussed, but yet again, I realize that I'm late because technical barriers are everywhere. But indeed, we'll be working hand in hand with NEPAD, AUDA, to organize the SME, regional SME dialogue. These are the issues that we'll be looking at, and very, very critical. And we want to ensure that when we reach at the global meeting, we are able to articulate our issues as SME, because without addressing these issues, we'll have missed a big opportunities. And this, again, is coming from transformation of dialogues to what we call action plans. So we are very keen on coming with real action plans. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for bringing that very valuable private sector perspective. I'm going to move to Professor Jerome and Dr. Abebe to see if you might have any responses to some of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A and in the chat. But before you, Professor Jerome, and then Dr. Abebe take the floor, I want to see if we have any representatives from the government of Congo or from of civil society, recognizing that Congo is our host for this conversation today, to see if there are any perspectives from that side. In the meanwhile, please raise your hand if you are a representative, or put it in the chat to the panelists, and I will see that. In the meanwhile, Professor Jerome, the floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Let me quickly address the issue of the youth budge. I see a lot of potential for African agriculture in spite of the current state. The continent owns about 60% of the arable land in agriculture in the whole world. So we have the capability to feed the entire world. On the other side, the average age of the farming population, average age of the farmer in Africa is 60 years. And 10 to 12 million youths enter the labor market every year in Africa. Unfortunately, many of them are not interested in agriculture. So we need to transform this sector to make it more interested, especially since we are told that agribusiness is said to be a $1 trillion industry by 2030. We have to take advantage of the Continental Free Trade Agreement to reduce the 45 billion imports, what we spend on import of foods every year, an amount which Africa can ill afford. But the future, to actually get the youths interested, and we need to change the sector through technology, especially digitalization. Let me stop here. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Dr. Abebe?
Muted.
Oh.
I thought the headphones worked really well earlier. I wonder if you might be able to go back to them. Meanwhile, Mr. Bahigwa, might you have any comments or anything to speak into this conversation that we're having? And once again, anyone from the Congo, it would be very helpful if you would just send me a chat so that I can allow some opportunity to spotlight. Dr. Abebe?
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
There must be some problem that I cannot understand why. Okay, there were a couple of questions that I had wanted to respond to. One is the issue of data. How can data be available? Another, Jerome spoke to the issue of use, but I want to also briefly touch on. And the last one is the cost of inputs. Now, data, there are two sides to the story. On the one side, there is this shortage of data for making decisions, important decisions at all levels. And on the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum is that there is a lot of data. A lot of data is sitting and is not being utilized. So organizations such as FAO, what we're doing is to bridge this gap. There is a lot of data, for example, in FAO, which can be made available easily using modern digital tools. We have set up data labs and platforms and open data systems, which will facilitate access to data where it is needed so that decisions are made on the basis of evidences. Secondly, on the use, I think we need to disband this narrative that agriculture is not attractive. For the use, even for the use, it's not for somebody else to make it attractive for them before they join it. They should be at the center. We have to create value for them. Agriculture is an attractive business. It must be organized as a business. That's why I spoke about incentives. What is the incentive for investment? What is the policy environment look like? And so on. And this ties well very much with the cost of inputs. It's an incentive issue. If the cost of inputs, whether it's fertilizer or seeds or whatever, even availability of this, if it is not there, we cannot talk about transformation, we cannot talk about modernization, we cannot talk about increased productivity. So it's an issue in Africa. How can we make the cost of inputs affordable? This is what I mean by incentives, whether it is from the policy perspective or from the environment as a whole. So there must be some mechanism to bridge the gap. There is a lot of information at the global regional level. There is less availability and usability of that at the local level. Institutions should be strengthened to bridge this gap. I wish I could have more time to elaborate this, but I think I've touched on. Thank you so much.
Passionate, powerful. Thank you so much for picking up on these key important points. At this point, I'm actually going to do something that tends to be rare in meetings, which is I really want us to end absolutely on the dot, right on time. And so I'm going to go back to each of our speakers and ask for one sentence closing remarks. And Godfrey, I want to start with you, Mr. Bahigwa. One sentence closing remark.
Let's all engage actively in finding solutions and proposing solutions that will transform Africa's food systems across the value chain.
Let us engage powerfully. Fantastic. Professor Jerome, and on behalf of Her Excellency Ambassador Sako.
Well, on behalf of Commissioner Sako, we all need to raise ambitions because Africa is not on track to attain both the Malabo goals and the biannual review report. We need to refocus our attention on how we can have a food systems of the future. And the World Food Summit gives us an opportunity. We should not miss. Thank you.
Let us refocus and let us pass the exam is what I'm hearing you say. And next, on behalf of Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki, the CEO of the AUDA NEPAD, Mr. Martin Bwalia.
Thank you. My statement would be, let's empower the grassroots and frontline players. We are not doing them any favor. It's actually for our own sake and the sake of the whole society. Over.
Fantastic, powerful. And I know that Dr. Frick has already had to leave and join another meeting, but I believe we heard adequately from him. Next, Dr. Bebe, on behalf of the FAO.
Thank you, Dr. Wanjiru, for the opportunity once again. Number one, we need effective leadership at all levels. It's not just at the government level. I'm talking about at all levels, including my friend, my sister Lucy was talking about private sector leadership across the board, effective leadership. Secondly, we need effective institutions. The problem that Africa faces is because we don't pay much attention to institutional strengthening our institutions. We need to have effective institutions. Without them, there is not going to be any sustainability. Thank you.
Institutions are core and key. And last but certainly not least, and very powerfully, Ms. Mushoki, over to you. You're muted. Lucy, you're on mute.
Oh my God, I'm sorry about that. Thanks. Thank you very much, Dr. Wanjiru. And indeed, I am happy to be the last because I have my powerful and last final saying that this is a time for Africa, that we know that everyone is focusing on us. Let us take advantage of these moments. Let us look at collaborations that lead us to transformation that will see us get there. I know that we are ready I know that we have everything going for us. Let us get the information. Information is power. Information is important. Let us use our research institution. Let us work together so we can be able to adapt and adopt and uptake those technologies, those innovations that will make us be able to transform our agricultural sector. Indeed, there's so much to be done, but it is the time. I want to say, and I want to encourage all of us, let us look at these partnerships. How can we work with one another? We have never for the last time, and very importantly, we have come together under our intra-Africa trade. This can never be better than things, can never be better than this. So this is our time, and I know that we shall do it. We have what it takes. Our youth are also with us right now. We are working together, and let us go, let us move, let us achieve results for our continent and for our future. Thank you very much.
Powerful words indeed, powerful words indeed. This is the time for Africa. And I particularly, as someone who works in the research space, I particularly appreciate that focus on research and reminding us that research is really the beginning end of agricultural value chains. And being able to turn that innovation, that research into market products is just key. Now, at this point, with 2 minutes to spare, I want to call upon Mehdad Helepi and hand back the meeting over into your hands. I want to thank each and every one of our panelists and our very engaged participants for your questions. I see people are posting in the chat. They want to connect. LinkedIn contacts are there. People have shared their email addresses. I know we're all going to be looking into that chat and picking up on the important connections that a forum such as this makes possible. Mehdad, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Wanjira. You did an excellent job. This is very, very appreciated. I mean, we couldn't have a better moderator than you. So this is very much appreciated. On the other thing is, maybe I don't like to talk on behalf of everyone or ACE, but it is a pleasure that we're very much indebted to the panelists. Their contributions were extremely rich. You cannot imagine how even the technical session was so much rich. I mean, we scheduled for 90 minutes. It went beyond 90 minutes. So panelists and participants' involvement were so much rich, and we benefited a lot from this intervention. The one other thing that I would like to comment here is the voices of stakeholders. We listen to them, and to me, it's a very much important that if we wanted to advance the African food system, that we need to listen to them, and they're very much active, and they wanted to get involved. You look at the chat; they are doing something, and even if you look at what Lucy was saying, and thanks Lucy for joining us. You know, IT. You know, this is the problem of IT. I mean, we were looking to advance African food system, but we said we have an issue with connectivity. This is basic thing. So. On behalf of ACE, I would like to thank as well the interpreters. They did an excellent job. Especially, I'm very much proud of the gentleman, the sign interpretation. I'm very much proud to belong to an organization that provides this kind of interpretation. This is very much appreciated. It's not because it's not my organization, but this is what we have to do. Other than that, I would like to extend sincere appreciation to all panelists in the technical segment as well in the policy one, and I would like to extend appreciation to all our partners. I don't like to name them because otherwise I'm going to end up problem if I miss someone, but their logos are in the position paper. Please have access to the link of this regional forum. We have a dedicated access. The position paper is there. Read it. This is Africa. We tried to get as much information about agriculture in Africa and how to advance into a better future for us. And we tried to collectively to put this in one single paper. So please have a look at it. Other than that, I would like to appreciate the senior management in ACE, including Mr. William and Mrs. Joanne. So thank you so much. And I would like to repeat myself again. You did an excellent job, Dr. Wanjira. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
And goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
partners, the African Union Commission, the International Trade Center, and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development on a project financially supported by the European Union to support AFCFTA implementation across Africa. So what is the AFCFTA? Africa currently consists of 55 fragmented markets that are also amongst the fastest growing economies in the world. Yet trade within the continent is the lowest globally. Africa does more trade with those outside its continental borders than with its neighbours. But this is about to change. An agreement on the African Continental Free Trade Area was signed in March 2018 and is expected to increase the share of intra-African trade by up to 50% between 2020 and 2040, liberalise services and tackle other barriers to intra-African trade. So what are the tangible benefits? When fully operational, the AFCFTA will bring together 1.2 billion people with a combined gross domestic product of more than $3 trillion, representing the biggest trade deal since the formation of the WTO, covering not only trading goods, services, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. The agreement is expected to benefit small and medium-sized businesses, which are responsible for more than 80% of Africa's employment and 50% of its GDP. ECA has been working with its partners to support and prepare countries for putting the agreement into practice. This means setting up platforms for dialogue and national regional events for discussion on the AFCFTA, supporting the African Union member states in developing national strategies to ensure countries can implement the AFCFTA considering the characteristics of their own markets, developing an AFCFTA country business index which will monitor and evaluate the implementation of the agreement for business. In addition to business, also mitigating the challenges, like ensuring the gender and youth-sensitive implementation of the AFCFTA, as well as mobilizing financial resources for implementation. The AFCFTA is an African solution for supporting industrial development, creating new business opportunities, generating jobs, and reducing poverty.
If you work in a team, you should be using Monday.com. It's a platform to manage any team and any workflow. Marketing, sales pipelines, construction, creative productions, you name it. Pick a template or start afresh. Here, you can track everything your team is working on. Simply drag and drop to create the perfect workflow for your team. Everything is customizable, even our logo. Damn, yo! See who's in charge of what and easily prioritize. Meanwhile, your team can communicate, send files, and get quick approvals and feedback. Slice and dice your data the way you want to see it. See a breakdown of progress or make sure everything is on schedule. Monday.com can connect with all your favorite tools so your team can bring all their work into one easy-to-use collaborative space. You can get a clear picture of what's happening right now with real-time reports
This is a very important story. The important story. In the midst of COVID-19, it's an historic opportunity to look at the facts of the world as it is, and then to focus on the solutions to some of our greatest problems. In the 75 years since the United Nations was founded, the human race has never had to face a set of challenges like we do right now. But together, we can overcome them.
It's a myth that each and every one of us doesn't have the ability to change the world dramatically and quickly. There have been enormous shifts in power and behavior to the benefit of all humanity, and it can happen again.
Nelson Mandela said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." These are some of the things that must be done.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
September 2020. The world is still in the grip of a global pandemic. There have been more than 27 million confirmed cases, and more than 900,000 people have died. Billions of people have been in lockdown for months. Lives and livelihoods have been threatened and lost. But as some lockdowns are easing, people are emerging into a different, uncertain world with a new appetite for change.
Today, we feel the weight of history on our shoulders. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown how fragile the world is. A microscopic virus has put us on our knees. And that fragility should make us humble.
COVID-19 has been likened to an X-ray, exposing fractures in the skeleton of the societies we have built. A world with great inequality, which must be righted. And a world which must win the battle against climate catastrophe.
The whole planet is at stake. So this is a moment to recognize that the way we have been moving leads nowhere, and that we need to change course.
The lockdowns also showed that our environment itself can change. In the Punjab, for the first time in generations, the Himalayas are visible once again. Lions have reclaimed the roads in Kruger National Park. In Venice, the canals run clear once more. And across Italy, dolphins have returned.
If you look at the response of people to COVID-19, people dramatically change their lives. But people have shown an enormous capacity to adapt to new circumstances, an enormous capacity to change the way they live, the way they work, the way they organize themselves. So, change is possible. The problem is political will.
It is so decided.
On the 25th of September 2015, all United Nations member states signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals, a set of solutions for the biggest problems the world faces. We're going to look at the 4 key areas where we must take urgent action, starting with climate and our planet.
Next door's on fire. Oh my God. Okay. I'm scared.
You're at risk. Leaving now is the safest option, so leave now towards the beach and shelter in place.
We're going. Claire's just getting in his car. We're out of here, you guys, because the whole place is on fire. Oh my God, my neighbor's house. Okay. Come on, Clay, we need to go. Oh my God. This is a real nightmare. I can't believe this is real. I can't see anything. This is literally not real. This is not real. Oh my freaking God. All I want is my family.
Pictures and stories continue to file out from Australia about the devastating fires. This one, a satellite image from NASA. And as you
Rising death toll and massive evacuation in Indonesia and water swan way to Jakarta following the heaviest downpour in more than 2 decades.
Worst plague of locusts to affect the region.
The damage to pastures and crops could create, quote, severe consequences for the region where nearly 12 million people are coping. It could be the worst the area has seen in 20 years.
This is a double whammy. You know, we're dealing with the cyclone and with the exposure to COVID.
Well, the fires raging in Northern California have now become some of the largest in state history. More than 12,000 firefighters are currently battling the places that have...
The San Francisco Bay Area smothered by some of the worst air quality on the planet.
Valley reaches an all-time high of 100.
Delhi on Tuesday recorded the hottest day.
Spiking above 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
I think this is the most important issue that we need to be talking about.
We are not drowning! We are not drowning!
Climate change is here now, and it is killing people right now. The people who are looking at it right in the face.
The next 8 to 10 years is going to determine the quality of life for the next 100 to 200 years.
We all watched with amazement when exactly 1 year ago, young people from all over the world took to the streets to express their feeling that we're not doing enough about climate change.
Today we take a stand for Mother Nature.
That we're not treating it like the emergency it is. It's a year later now. Have we done enough? No, we have not. And climate change is only part of this story. Our rainforests are disappearing at an extraordinary rate. 1 football field of rainforest is destroyed every 6 seconds. 1 million plant and animal species are on the brink of extinction. By 2050, there will be more plastic in the oceans than fish. And so climate change and our treatment of the natural world are colliding and exacerbating each other to create a perfect storm. This cannot go on. You know it, I know it, and we know what we need to do. We need to reduce global emissions by 50% by 2030. To do this, we need a rapid but just transition to renewable energy. That means an end to the building of new coal power stations and an end to subsidizing of fossil fuels. Government should also shift the tax burden from payrolls to carbon. Taxing carbon rather than people will increase output and employment while reducing emissions. And we need to stop deforestation in its tracks, planting trees instead of chopping them down. We need to think about what we eat and how we produce food. embracing healthy, nutritious diets, sustainable farming methods, and reducing food waste. The climate crisis is an opportunity. Renewable energy is cheaper than fossil fuels. Thousands of businesses are working to go carbon neutral, and the opportunity to generate clean, safe, and decent jobs is enormous. The passion for protest can turn into a passion for changing all of our behavior to create a better, safer, just, sustainable world. The big question we have to ask ourselves now is this: as a species, are we going to be able to work together urgently to solve this? The clock is ticking.
Poverty and inequality are universal. They undermine every society, everywhere. But poverty is not natural. It is man-made, so poverty is not inevitable. It's an area where the world has made huge progress in the past few decades. Just 30 years ago, there were 1.9 billion people living in extreme poverty, but that number has been transformed. In 2015, it fell to 734 million people. That's over 1 billion people lifted out of poverty.
1 billion people out of poverty is amazing. It was across the world we lifted people out of poverty. Across the world, more kids got into education. As across the world, maternal mortality was reduced. Across the world today, not many people will be left without access to a mobile phone, and what that has done to empower them to access to education, to a livelihood, is huge.
But still, almost 10% of the human race is living unbelievably harsh lives. This is largely determined by their circumstances at birth, and these high levels of inequality work against better opportunities for all. Opportunities that could change the world.
I want to tell you a story about 1999. I used to teach people how to write computer programs. And I had a very, plush office and everything. And just outside of these offices, there was this large, sprawling, urban slum full of children. So one day I tried an experiment. I made an opening in the boundary wall that separated my offices from the slum. And then I fixed a computer so that from the other side of the wall, you could see the computer and a touchpad. On the first day, we saw this 8-year-old boy teaching a 6-year-old girl how to surf. How on earth did he figure that out? How did he know what the computer was doing? 3 months after I had first put their computer in the wall, the children said they wanted a faster processor and a better mouse. I asked them, how on earth do you know these words? Where did you learn this from? And they said, well, you've left a machine here that speaks only in English, so we had no option but to learn the language. Easy, isn't it? I repeated the hole-in-the-wall experiment for 5 years across the length and breadth of India. In a village 300 miles away from Delhi, one girl is explaining to the other girl what a neuron is. They're just 12 years old. Wow. We have hope. We have an enormous potential of what children can achieve together if we let them.
There is potential everywhere. We just have to unlock it. A huge amount depends on where public money is spent. More of it must urgently go into health, into giving everyone a safety net. There is a revolution that is happening in education, connecting every school, every person to the internet. This can be done. The recovery from COVID must lead to an economy that works for everyone. Let's start with tax. We have widespread tax concessions, tax avoidance, and tax evasion, which means that there's so much less money for all the crucial things. Many developing countries are weighed down by historical debts, spending more money on debt repayments than they are spending on healthcare. And then there's the importance of global investment in peace. The peace dividend for the world is immeasurable, and we must break the vicious cycle of corruption and increase the power of the people to keep check on the people in power. A free, independent media and responsible social media platforms that encourage healthy debate. Equality unleashes the potential of everyone to improve their own lives and contribute to the lives of
Coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair,
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and if I could ask the technical team to stop the video so we can start. Thank you.
Nothing could be worse than
Excellences, mesdames et messieurs, bon après-midi et bienvenue. Excusez-nous pour ce retard pour le démarrage de nos travaux de cet après-midi. Nous sommes en train juste de connecter les personnalités du bureau pour pouvoir démarrer notre session. Nous vous remercions de patienter quelques instants pour que nous adressons ces dernières petites questions et nous pouvons démarrer tout de suite la session. Alors, juste quelques instants, Excellences, mesdames et messieurs, et nous allons démarrer. Merci de votre patience. Excellences, mesdames et messieurs, si vous venez de nous rejoindre, merci de patienter encore quelques instants. Nous allons démarrer très, très prochainement. Merci de votre patience. Excellences, mesdames et messieurs, bon après-midi et bienvenue encore une fois pour la continuation de nos travaux. Et je passe la parole avec Madame la Présidente qui va diriger nos travaux cet après-midi. Madame la Ministre, Madame la Présidente, à vous.
Merci à vous, Monsieur Adam Jean-Paul. Mesdames et messieurs, je vous souhaite à nouveau la bienvenue. Nous sommes maintenant au point 10 de notre ordre du jour qui comporte 3 points subsidiaires de cet après-midi. Le point subsidiaire A sera une présentation par les grands groupes et autres parties prenantes suivie d'un débat général. Je voudrais donc inviter, sans trop tarder, pour rattraper ces petites minutes de retard, Madame Edith Madela, MTela, à faire la présentation donc, au nom des grands groupes et des autres parties prenantes. Madame Edith Madela Matla, vous avez donc la parole. Je vous en prie. Êtes-vous en ligne? Madame Edith Madela est-elle en ligne? Secrétariat, s'il vous plaît, pouvez-vous me dire si Madame Edith Madela Mentala est en ligne?
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Nous sommes en train de vérifier et de résoudre le problème si elle n'arrive pas à prendre la parole. Merci de patienter quelques instants à tout le monde. En attendant que nous pouvons aussi connecter Madame, je note aussi un message dans le chat qu'il n'y a pas d'interprétation. Et si nous pouvons résoudre, je demande à l'assistance technique de résoudre le problème d'interprétation. Je crois que si je ne me trompe pas, c'est un problème d'interprétation entre le français et l'anglais. It appears there is a problem of interpretation from French into English. So we're also just trying to solve this to be able to proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, we have learned that our speaker has just connected. So he's just had some connection issues and we're just finalizing that for them to be able to take the floor. Mesdames et messieurs, nous sommes en train de finaliser la connexion de notre présentatrice. Merci de patienter quelques instants. Est-ce que je peux vérifier que l'interprétation marche maintenant? Est-ce que je peux avoir la confirmation que ça marche? Okay, mesdames et messieurs, j'ai eu la confirmation que l'interprétation marche maintenant. Et nous sommes juste en train de connecter notre présentatrice pour démarrer. Et if I could also ask the technical team, please, to ensure that Joy Kategekwa is also made a panelist, as she will also be speaking very shortly. And also Micheline Bossard. So if we could just make sure that the technical team are giving the access to these persons as panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for just being patient with us. We have almost solved the problem. Just in terms of not losing time, if I could ask Joy Kategekwa to stand by, because we'll go to you first. So Joy, please stand by, and then we will take the other presentations afterwards. So just please stand by to be introduced by the Minister. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just before we also proceed with the presentation, can I just check that Mr. Munyarabzi is connected? Il est là?
Allô, allô?
Yes, yes,
Voilà.
Your Excellency, I'm online. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. J'aimerais maintenant avoir le plaisir donc de Monsieur Shenji, vous avez donc la parole. Je vous remercie vraiment et de pouvoir nous permettre de gagner du temps en pouvant intervenir maintenant. Vous avez donc la parole. Merci bien. It's you now.
Thank you, Your Excellency. To the expectation of our member states, SDGs, and also strategic advisor in UNDP, Miss Antonia Joy Kategekwa, who is going to present on the work of the regional development system in
national, etc. They will really be to give a flavor. Area around demographic dividends, how do we tap and reap that? The fourth demographic dividend.
And 11% partially. And in addition, the government of Zambia was able to develop the national SDG in playing its